happy to be here today and introducing your keynote speaker. The session is being recorded, as indicated by that big red button right there. So when we do have a Q&A after the speaker's done his presentation, we ask you to come up to the mic because we want to ensure that we capture that on clear audio, because this will be put onto the YouTube channel afterwards, so those that weren't able to be here can actually see what happened in the session today. And when you do come to the mic at that point, we ask you to identify yourself with your name, your municipality. And there's also, who's using the app in the room? 2, 3, 4, 5, yay. If you don't want to come up to the mic, you're more than welcome to type your question into that feature on the app. Some of you are a little shy, I know, I am myself. So you can just type it in there, and then the staff will read that question afterwards for you. So just make sure you say what your name is on there, so they're not going to say your municipality and your, don't need to put your name on it. Just type your question. We'll take anything you want off of there. So.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to SUMA for having us. Our intention here today is have a conversation regarding some of the issues that are concerning a lot of our communities nowadays. Street gangs is obviously a very prevalent issue. My experience over the last 5 years or so has been primarily with street gangs. I initially started as an integrated intelligence unit in 2012 with Saskatoon Police Service. I was a part of the RCMP, and then in 2018, I had the opportunity to work on a proof of concept team with F Division, and it resulted in the creation of 2 crime reduction teams in the province. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the crime reduction teams. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I've seen through just simple interactions. Prior to becoming involved with the crime reduction team, I was a plainclothes officer. So what that really meant was I had a dirty beard, but I got to talk to a lot of people, and I got to talk to people at a different level. Sometimes when you have a uniform on, people just see that uniform. But when you have just jeans on, a t-shirt, and you can just talk to somebody and sit across from them, you learn a lot. And I think that's really prepared me for moving forward with the crime reduction team, and then moving forward with hopefully helping you determine some of the things that are going to be best for your communities, and we can look to essentially build a safer community together. I may miss out a few things. Like Darren said, there's going to be a question and answer period after. I typically talk to police officers. That's usually my audience. And so be patient with me. I'm not sure how today's going to go. So I'm definitely going to do my best, and hopefully I can answer some of those questions that you guys may have. A few things that we're going to cover today. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of street gangs. I'm going to tell you some of the indicators that you may see in your communities. I'm going to tell you about some of the things that I see. And like I said, it is going to be fairly brief though. We're going to talk about the F Division crime reduction teams, and that's specifically the 2 teams that were introduced by the province back in, I believe it was May 2019. Some of you from the bigger cities now, Prince Albert, Saskatoon, and Regina, are probably aware that what used to be known as the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit has now moved over to an integrated crime reduction team. And so I'll be able to talk a little bit about that, and I will be referring to that as well. So. But just, I just want to make sure that you understand that most of my stuff and most of my experience is with the crime reduction teams on the provincial level. We're going to look at a multifaceted approach to street gangs. One of the things that I hope to impress upon you today is it's really all about collaboration. I've seen what enforcement does, and I know that there's more needed. Enforcement's a short-term goal. Suppression's a short-term goal. That's not going to lead us necessarily in the direction that we need to go into the future. We're going to look at the gang violence reduction strategy, and that's something that's put on by the province. There's a few things here that I don't have a lot of experience with, but the reason I've included it is because it's important as we move forward. There's important steps that we need to take to build those, again, safer communities. I'm going to then look at providing you a street-level perspective. So I am a corporal with the crime reduction team based out in North Battleford. I deploy every week. I go with my team every week. I'm in a police car, I'm stopping people, I'm arresting people, I'm doing all that. So what I hope to convey as well is some of those things that I see so that you can have a perspective from the police side of things and just the direct level of enforcement moving forward. And then we're going to talk about some things that I think and that we think through collaboration that's already started about how we can construct safer communities and safer cities. We're going to look at a few statistics, specifically on meth and firearms. And then I'm going to talk about a few things that I'd like the community to take away from this presentation. And then we're going to go into the question and answer period. So that's hopefully everything goes as planned, but we'll see. So the brief overview of street gangs. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 5.5 years. I've been a police officer for 12.5 years. My career started in Hay River, Northwest Territories. I'm from Ituna, Saskatchewan, so I was born and raised there. I know what it's like living on a farm. I was basically raised just outside there. I was there until I was about 20 years old. So for me, moving to Hay River was interesting. When I first got to Hay River, a police officer was killed, and I realized the vast issues that communities face. One of the issues up there was drugs. Crack cocaine was huge up there. And as I progressed over the next couple of years, I learned that there were street gangs that were actually coming up from Edmonton and selling drugs in the Northwest Territories because they could make a lot of money. And they didn't have the same indicators that we're seeing right now in Saskatchewan. So we have to be very open-minded. We have to be dynamic in what we do. But what you guys are typically going to see in your communities are, you're going to see graffiti, you're going to see fences marked up, you're going to see, sometimes you're going to see numbers referencing a street gang. You're going to see guys with bandanas potentially walking through stores, walking up and down your streets. You're going to see guys wearing all the same color. Those are the most common indicators of a street gang, but sometimes those aren't always obvious, okay? Sometimes when we're investigating different files, we see that they've started to try and hide some of those indicators from us because we're looking at different avenues of investigation and enforcement. So, like I said, it is going to be very brief, but those are the most important things and probably the things you're going to most likely be able to see. The F Division Crime Reduction Team, so from February 2018 to May 2018, I was part of a 90-day concept team where we basically had a group of people put together and they said, get out there, go get bad guys, and go do police work and help out the communities. And so that was what we did. We focused much of our effort through central West Saskatchewan. We went to places like North Battleford. We were up in Cutknife, Onion Lake, Pierceland, Loon Lake, kind of in that area. We had a lot of success, and I think we did a lot of good work. And there was an important approach to where we talked to a lot of people. When we're in these communities, we focus on talking to people. And so we were able to move that into what happened to be an interim team where there's about 7 of us. And then on September 1st, 2018, we had 2 full teams established of 7 members on each team. Each team has a sergeant, a corporal, and 4 constables. I was lucky enough to get promoted in January 2019 to the corporal position in North Battleford. And prior to that, I worked as a constable in North Battleford. We have an administrative position. We also have 1 analyst, which is really important. I think hopefully when we go into some of those further slides and you see some of the statistics, and hopefully I can emphasize the importance of being intelligence-led. That's where the analytical support comes in. In late fall 2018, there was a staff sergeant position created. So we've seen the crime reduction teams initially start with funding for 10 positions, and the RCMP has also supplemented that. So we're now at 14 positions, RCMP, constable, corporals, and sergeants, and now a staff sergeant. The staff sergeant oversees the CRT unit, the integrated CRT, the serious violent offender, high-risk offender units, and Prince Albert ISET, which is also an integrated street enforcement team based out of Prince Albert. And one of the important roles for the staff sergeant as well is to liaise with the different agencies moving forward. As I've said before, and as I'm going to continue to say, collaboration is important, and that's one of the ways that we are going to be able to move forward and have further success. When the teams were created, there was a bunch of us from a bunch of different backgrounds. So we had members that were initially from general duty. My background was plainclothes surveillance, and basically talking to confidential informants and trying to build up the intelligence level that we had in the province. We had members that came from organized crime units, so what's now called FSOC, it's Federal Serious Organized Crime. We have members that have training with impaired driving, both with breath and drug recognition experts. We have members that are involved in writing high-level judicial authorizations, and then again, the confidential informant and the street gang stuff. So we've got a really diverse group that I think can tackle and deal with various issues that the communities face. As we've progressed, we know that not every community has the same need for the crime reduction team. What's important is we try and base our actions on what that community is looking for. Sometimes it's rural crime, so we focus on doing patrols outside of the normal community, so outside the town proper, and we hit the RMs. And we see what we can find. We stop vehicles, we talk to people, and we see what we can learn. So the mandate of the crime reduction team is really to collaborate with detachments, community leaders, municipal partners to achieve a common goal of safe homes and safe communities. I think whether you're in Stony Rapids, Saskatchewan, or Carlisle, Saskatchewan, we all want to have safe homes and safe communities. We look to achieve this goal by conducting targeted enforcement, identifying hotspots, active gang suppression and enforcement, high visibility patrols, identifying new crime trends, and providing an increased overt police presence to the communities in need. And so when I say overt presence, 95% of the time our unit is in general duty uniform. So just like the members in your communities, we look just like them. The only difference that you're going to see is on the side of our vehicles we have crime reduction team. But we look identical to the members policing your communities. When we look at deploying, we talk to the detachment, we determine what their needs are, and through those communications we learn through that detachment commander too what the community is looking for, especially if it's a first-time deployment. We want to have as much information moving forward as we can. And then we look at talking to the analysts, and we talk to the other CRT team. We look to determine the objective or goal of each deployment. And again, like I said, we look at overt or covert, sometimes a combination of. Sometimes we'll have part of our team in plainclothes, sometimes we'll have the rest of our team in uniform. In some situations, we've deployed both teams to the same location. We've had police dog services attend with us, and in some cases, we can actually look to have air support. When we're moving into a community, we look to make sure that we notify the detachments surrounding the area, and in some situations, we look at, if we're up in Onion Lake, for example, we look to notify Lloydminster, our CMP, because they're a different division than us. If we're going to be working around Saskatoon, we look to let Saskatoon Police Service know, because sometimes we have mutual targets, and that communication is important so that we can have success, and then it also helps the cities as well. We also look to see what the capabilities are of the detachments. Some detachments we've been to, we can really only fit about 3 people once we set up our computers and things like that. So we have a lot of different factors that we have to consider. Our team can deploy from one location to another within hours. We have computers, we have everything that we need to be sustainable moving forward. We don't need to really even have an office. We have a lot of good tools available to us, and I think that's really important as well as we move forward, where we can be mobile, just like the criminals are that we're going after. Our teams really, when we're planning deployments, we look at determining if we need to do a proactive deployment or a reactive deployment. So what we first look at doing is determining if there's a certain location in the province that's experiencing an influx of persons-based crimes, because at the end of the day, our first priority is violence against persons. So we want to make sure that, first of all, those communities are safe, and if we can put in more members in that community, that's what we're going to do. If we're in a situation where there isn't a lot of persons-based crime during that deployment, we're going to look at moving to the next. And rural crime is obviously a high priority for most people here. And so we try and make sure that we're efficient in everything that we do. We look to talk to the detachments and see if there's individuals that we need to focus on. We work with our analytical support to identify hotspots. So sometimes we'll have criminals go into a certain area and commit a bunch of B&Es or a bunch of stolen vehicles. And so we try and be intelligence-led and evidence-based when we're doing our work. If we can try and get to some of these areas while things are happening, that's going to help decrease crime, and it's going to help hopefully catch some of these guys. And then we also look at reviewing available information to determine locations of high-risk offenders. So if at one point during our deployment, we know that there's somebody that has committed a bunch of crimes, if we can determine where they are, we're going to focus on getting those guys into custody. The next is reactive. So like I said, we first base our determination on where we're going to go by what's happening. And so detachments can actually send us a request. There's been occasions where I've been up in Pelican Narrows, for example, and we've redeployed during our deployment to another location in central Saskatchewan. So that's a really important benefit of the crime reduction teams. The request will specify the issue the community or detachment is facing. We'll make a determination if we need to deploy down the road. So sometimes there might be an event happening 3 weeks down the road. So we'll look at seeing if a team can deploy to that. If it's something immediate, like I said, we'll go immediately to it. And we can really deploy it. The amount of time it takes to pack things up is all that we need to redeploy. So we're very flexible with what we do. Deployments can occur anywhere in the province. I've been from, like I said, Carlisle up to Black Lake. So our teams are very interested in working in different communities, and we have the ability to do that. And again, deployments are based on locations. We look at hotspot identification, essentially the things I've already discussed with you, so I'm not going to go through each of those. At the end of each deployment, we also have statistics available, so we look at determining how many people we arrest, how many warrants are executed, and just what we've done to help that community out. The analytical support, so we have analysts attached to the crime reduction team. So they basically go through the intelligence, they go through crime trends, and they do really awesome work that helps us be prepared when we're going into communities. And again, we like to, our focus is on those high priority people. We have people that are on traffic warrants and things like that, but our priority is the worst of the worst, because in a lot of cases, those same people are committing crimes all over the place, and we need to get them before the justice system so that it can play its role. Suppression. So while I was while I was with Integrated Intelligence, I worked with Central District, and we focused on one community. There was an influx in gang violence in that area. Rural crime strategy was developed, and again, it was comprised of multiple members throughout a few different units. We focused on target enforcement, gang member identification, and intelligence gathering. Multiple deployments to the area resulted in a recovery of property, which included a tractor-trailer unit. So just the power unit of the semi, we were able to locate that and recover that. So those are some of the things that we can do. We identified 40 gang members, and we'd also execute over 65 arrest warrants. So it's pretty important, the work that the RCMP has allowed us to do, and just how we've sort of evolved with some of the criminality that's been occurring. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about suppression and enforcement, and I'm going to talk about it as two different things. The suppression is really going into a community and just trying to keep things before they explode, essentially. And when I talk about enforcement, that's a little bit longer term, where we're looking at determining how best to move forward, how we can work with the Crown prosecutors, how we can work with the communities, how we can look to ensure that we're doing the best that we can to keep our community safe, as well as being effective and efficient. So there's a few different things that are involved there. The crime reduction teams maintain what's called a street gang portfolio. So everything dealing with street gangs is typically going to come through our unit. We're an oversight for charges and things like that as well. We'll do file reviews, we'll assist detachments, and we also will be liaising with designated provincial crown, and that has started. Provincial crown was identified in 2009 by the province, specific to street gangs, and that's an important step moving forward. That crown prosecutor is also a contact point for us. So I'm not sure, everybody's got a different role in this room here right now, but I think it's safe to say that if you have one specific point of contact for what you're doing, it makes your job a lot easier instead of talking to 10 different people, right? And so that's an important step going forward. And then another important step that's more on the intelligence side of things is the Ministry of Justice increased the number of SIOs, so Security Intelligence Officers in correctional facilities, to enhance information sharing abilities. And so why is that important with the enforcement side? So these SIOs communicate with us. We get information from them. We learn what's happening in corrections so that we can try and counteract some of the things that are happening in the field. Because we know through investigations that we've done that in a lot of situations, what's happening in cells, in provincial corrections, even federal corrections, directly involves what's happening on the outside in your community. So I'm going to go into a little bit more of that here moving forward. Intervention and exit strategies. So this is something that I don't have a lot of experience about, but it's important for the communities and the cities to know that we are looking at conducting a multifaceted approach. And so hopefully by the end of this, I'm going to be able to tie all that in together, and you'll understand where we're coming from and why it's so important that we do these steps. So in 2009, there's a media release put out by the province where $4.5 million were put into the province of Saskatchewan invested $4.5 million over the next 4 years into 2 community-based organizations as part of their gang violence reduction strategy. So it's straight up, and then RT assists in Regina. So talking to gang members and people involved in gang activity, like I said before, when I was in plainclothes, we saw a different side of these people. They're all in gangs for different reasons, but what's important is that they have, and that there's a contact base established for them. Because I'm sure you guys have heard it all over the news. I know that there's some articles that just came out in Saskatoon where you've been told that we're not going to be able to arrest our way out of this, and enforcement isn't the only action that we need to take. And I couldn't agree more. And it's so important that we focus on that, and that's really where we look at the gang intervention and the gang exit strategies. So our role moving forward is we want to help identify gang members. We want to be able to proactively contact CBOs so that we can try and take that proactive step of helping people out and giving them a contact point. So we're going to act as referral agents, and then we're going to collaborate with other law enforcement agencies because we want to ensure that we're all doing things the same way and that there's a consistent approach moving forward. The education, awareness, and prevention. So when we look at education and awareness, we can't just look at, at just communities. Because as a police officer, I know that before I became immersed in some of these investigations, I didn't necessarily have the tools I needed or the awareness of what was actually happening in some of these communities. So it's important that we take steps to train our own first so that they can recognize what's happening in the community, recognize who gang members and gang individuals or people involved in gang activity or people who might be susceptible to some of the gang activity know what they're looking for. We also need to look to prosecutions, just like police. When we look at criminal organization charges, so when we look at that, it's not just a simple charge. So for us, if we charge somebody with assault, it's very straightforward. If we charge somebody with a criminal organization offense, it's very complex and it's very different. And so not all of our members have the training, knowledge, or awareness to deal with that. And so that's where we, the members who have been involved in this, need to help them out. There's also Crown prosecutors who haven't had that same experience because this isn't necessarily new, but we're looking at different ways to deal with this. And so like I said, a lot of prosecutors haven't had that opportunity. We also need to talk to our communities and our community leaders. I've had the opportunity to go to some town halls, not a lot yet, but I think that's something that's important moving forward where we can look at the education and awareness piece and try and answer questions. I had a chance to go to Glasland, I believe it was about a year ago, and just talk to the community. And again, it's all about sharing perspectives and what we're seeing and trying to relate to the community about what they're seeing and just explain to them sometimes the actions that we're taking. So the awareness and education is important on all levels here. And then we need to work at doing a better job of sharing information. That's something that's very dynamic, and that's something that is going to take some effort to move forward with. We need to develop educational material. So before, my perceptions as I kind of became involved in this, that 13, 14, 15-year-old kids are maybe just getting involved in organized crime or street gangs and things like that. Well, I can tell you that that's changed a lot. We need to be looking at very much younger children. In one of my interviews, I had talked to somebody, and they said that they had kids as young as 8 involved because they're not going to face the same punishment as somebody that's 18 or 20 or 12. So there's a lot of different things that we need to realize here on how to move forward. But we also need to make sure that we just don't do a knee-jerk reaction. Just throwing money at something isn't going to solve a problem. We need to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and we're actually doing things that are going to help. So in some situations, it's taking us a bit of time to develop some of these things, but we want to make sure it's effective. If we just throw something at the communities, that's not going to help them, right? So some of these things are going to take time, and unfortunately there's going to be a requirement for really some patience as well. Another piece that's important is the community constable positions and the Cpos, so the community program officers. One of the community program officers that was in one of our Central West communities had started developing different pamphlets, and I've got it on the next slide here, but those are some of the things that we need to do moving forward. Community constables are also somebody that we can look to in some cases to help us with that community outreach and that communication piece, because again, I'll say it probably 100 times today, but the communication and collaboration is the most important thing by far. It's going to outweigh anything that I can do as a police officer, that the Crown can do in court, or that a civilian can do on the street. It's really the most important piece. So I'm not sure if you can all see this, but this is a draft of something that's been created, and it's really good. It puts out the most important information that's needed for the community, and so I'll just read it out. So it's called GAP, it's Gang Awareness and Prevention Project, and it just gives you the warning signs of gang involvement. So changing clothing style. The person carries a bandana. That's huge in the province. So many of the people that we arrest that are street gang related are all carrying bandanas, or we're going to find that bandana in vehicle. Parents might find in their kids' rooms. They develop a secretive behavior. So maybe that once outgoing child who communicated really well with their family is becoming a bit of a shut-in. And so they're not displaying those normal behaviors that they did before. They might drop out of school, their routine changes. There's unexplained income or property, so they might be involved with theft. They might be involved in dealing drugs, and that could identify where these new things are coming from, where the money's coming from, where the TVs are coming from. They use hand signs. I can't do those hand signs, so I'm not going to give you an example of it, but each gang typically has their own hand sign. And in some situations, as I've been dealing with people, they've flipped me the hand sign. And it's just, yeah, it's frustrating. In a lot of situations too, we'll see tattoos. Sometimes those tattoos are as a result of maybe moving up in the gang. Sometimes different tattoos have different relevance within the gang itself. There may be references to certain numbers or symbols. So certain gangs have different numbers that basically reference the letters in the alphabet. So I'm not going to bother, and during this presentation, I'm not going to refer to any specific gangs or anything like that. I don't want to glorify them. I don't want to give them any more attention because it doesn't help us out, and it's not going to help the message that we're trying to convey to the communities. You're also going to see that these guys are carrying weapons or drugs, and they develop new addictions. I'll go into a little bit more, but it's unbelievable the amount of impact that methamphetamine has had in our province and with the people that we're dealing with. So again, this is one more slide that isn't my thing, but again, it's important to show the communities that there are actions being taken at various different levels. And so this is from the province of Saskatchewan. It's from their gang violence reduction strategy. The province has 4 pillars in the strategy, so enhanced prosecutions. Enhancing resources dedicated to the prosecution of individuals involved in gun and gang crime. So again, that's important moving forward so that we have the proper people looking at these files and we can make the proper determinations. We don't want to send files to the Crowns, and the Crowns don't want to prosecute files that don't meet the criteria that's set forward. So with this, I think it's really going to help to just really be effective in the way we're doing things and the way that the tax money is being spent on these different programs. Then we look at expanded criminal intelligence and analytics. So expand the use of data through analytics, through intelligence information coordination amongst partners. So one of the things that we're looking at moving forward is working with Criminal Intelligence Services Saskatchewan to try and identify something that we can do as a whole. So not just the RCMP, not just CISS, but as a whole, where we have our municipal partners involved, we have the RCMP involved, and we have the intelligence agencies involved, so that we can have a collaborative approach to make sure that we're not, for example, that maybe Saskatoon Police Service isn't targeting somebody that we're targeting. Again, it's just being efficient with what we're doing. They've also focused on relentless outreach and prevention in communities. So implementing new evidence-based intensive community outreach programs and increased proven offender programming. So that what they want to do is increase offender programming proven to reduce behaviors related to gang activity. So my street level perspective, I'm hopefully not going to get any trouble for this. My boss is here, so I'm going to try and just give you what I see. Like I said, every week that we're on the road, I'm on the road with my team. If something happens, I'm there. I get to see what's happening in the communities. I get to talk to people. Over the last 5 to 6 years, I've seen an escalation in violence. I can tell you that I've seen an escalation in violence towards police. Not very long ago, I had one of my police cars get rammed. So we're seeing the impacts of the communities, and I can assure you that we feel those impacts too. We may not be as vocal about it. We may not convey some of those messages to the community, but we are experiencing that. We understand what's happening. I've had the opportunity to talk to so many different people, and like I said, at different levels. Some of the people that we're dealing with are involved in gangs because family members involved in gangs. Sometimes we're seeing somebody involved in gangs because unfortunately, they're bad people. You can't really put it any better than that. Sometimes we have people that just don't really care about the norms of society, the same rules that you and I follow. And sometimes we get people that are looking to get into gangs because they want a sense of security and safety, and that gang is, at that point, at that point in their life, they think that gang is going to offer them that safety and security. And 2 months, 3 months down the road, that isn't necessarily the case, and then they can't get out. So, what else have I seen? We've seen a lot. You've seen a lot in the news. You've seen that violence has increased. Our gangs aren't necessarily just involved in one or two aspects of criminality. Our gangs are involved in drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, a variety of different things. We know that meth is the cause of a lot of this. When I talk to people, I don't take a lot of statements from people anymore. I let the constables do that because they're better at that. What I try and do is I talk to people, but we talk to a lot of people, and they say when they first do meth, they can't get off of it. They're hooked. And so we need to find ways to move forward to try and prevent, in some cases prevent, but look at the proper addictions counseling and things like that. We look at firearms thefts. I can't tell you how many times I've been involved in high-risk situations where I've found guns in the vehicle. I can tell you one situation where I was in a community. I couldn't figure out who this guy was. He wasn't telling me he wasn't being honest with me, believe it or not, somebody not being honest with the cops. But I talked to him. I was able to figure out who he was, and I arrested him. I put the handcuffs on him. I searched him, and he had a gun in his waistband. So it's unbelievable the just things that we don't necessarily expect. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that was, I would have maybe come across that once in my career. But almost every day that we're dealing with these high-risk individuals, there's firearms, there's weapons, there's batons, there's all kinds of things that are there to hurt you and hurt us. The firearms aren't coming in from the US. In some situations, there was a thing that came out, I believe it was this morning, from the Toronto Chief of Police, where they talked about how they obviously have a big firearms problem, they have a big gang problem as well. They talked about how guns are coming in and so on. But I can tell you from my experience in Saskatchewan and the communities that I police, the guns are coming from our communities. They're coming from break-and-enters, they're coming from robberies to gun stores. They're local. They're not being imported from the US or anything like that. There may be a few situations where we have maybe higher-end organized crime groups that are doing that. But I can tell you that our street gangs aren't doing that right now. In most cases, they're not that sophisticated. They're not that organized, but they're just organized enough that they cause us grief and they cause you guys grief in the communities. We're seeing recruiting at younger ages. Like I said before, I had one situation where I was told that there was an 8-year-old kid that was involved in this. And so that really comes down to the education, awareness, prevention part of it, where we need to focus on people that are much younger than what we've typically been looking at. There's a continual increase in street gang recruitment. It's crazy the amount of people that we've identified now as street gangs, and I would stress that we've probably just scratched the surface. We're nowhere near where we should be with identified street gang associates or members. We're seeing recruiting in correctional centers. So I'll give you an example of that. We go and arrest somebody, they get remanded, so they get detained in custody. They go into corrections. If they go into general population, you can rest assured that they have just tried to recruit 4 more people, and then they get those people to recruit 4 more. So it's a snowball effect right now. Gang recruitment in corrections is a huge problem for us. The mobility of street gangs. When I first started doing some of this stuff, our street gangs typically were contained within certain communities or certain areas. Now we're seeing street gangs essentially all over the province where we had no idea that they had the contacts that they did. And in a lot of cases, this is for drug trafficking and criminality. Sometimes we're even seeing street gangs dealing with each other just for money, basically, just for business. So, and then again, street gangs are increasingly becoming more prevalent and violent in our community. So community safety is always a concern for us. That's our highest concern. We want to make sure that everyone is safe, and we want to make sure we're doing everything that we can. We also need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to be safe, and we're seeing an increase in that. We're seeing more violence as we move forward. And again, many of the firearms, like I said, are local. Gang members are playing active roles while incarcerated, and they have a direct impact, and I touched on this a little bit earlier. I've had the opportunity to work, like I said, just straight level stuff, and I've also had the opportunity to work on some higher end projects where we've targeted leaders and higher end members of street gangs. And we know that from corrections, they're having a direct impact on what's happening in the communities that we're dealing with. They're giving direction. They're telling their subordinates to go and assault people. They're telling them where to commit their crimes. They're providing drug contacts. They're doing all that stuff from inside corrections. So there's a lot that we need to do moving forward. Individuals are entering gangs for different reasons. And like I said, there's not one single cause, but every situation is a little bit different. It's usually because of feeling of family or belonging, for safety. And like I said, some guys are essentially just bad. They want to live the gang lifestyle. It's really nothing more than that. So now I've given you all the bleak news and all the terrible stuff. How do we move forward? How do we help you guys have safer communities so that your constituents can talk to you and we can look at having some meaningful results come out of all of this? And so this is something that I believe is really not just my opinion, but I think some of this is really fact-based. And I think this is the message that we're trying to convey as the RCMP right now. We need to focus on our youth. If we don't focus on our youth, we're not going to get any further ahead 10 years down the road. Like I said, we can arrest all these people, but there's going to be somebody that's going to take their place. And so we really need to look at changing how we're doing things. Obviously, we're not going to stop the enforcement and the suppression, but what I really want to get across is that's not the only thing that we need to do, and really that we have to do. We have to move forward. We have to look at other ways. We need to keep our youth active. We need to make sure that our youth feel wanted in the communities, that they belong, and that they have something to do. It's a dumb story, but growing up in Ituna, Saskatchewan, there wasn't a lot to do. But when I think I was like probably grade 9 or grade 10, but one of the teachers in our school opened up the gym and we played floor hockey Friday nights. You know, it was something different. It was something that gave kids somewhere to go and something to do. I had to bug my parents for a ride all the time, but it was still good. I think that really helped us. And then that helped, I think, me realize some of the stuff that maybe was useful in my past might help maybe some future individuals. We need to look at providing support for people looking to exit gangs. This is crucial. I think we need to look at long-term successes. So that's kind of why I broke things down into 3 steps. So we have the suppression and enforcement. Those are our short-term goals. We want to do everything that we can to make sure that you feel safe in your communities. The next step is the intervention, the exiting. That's a midterm thing. So when we get people that are involved in street gangs, what we need to do is try and see if we can find ways for them to get out of street gangs. Because rest assured, when they get out of jail, they're probably going to go back to the exact same behavior that they were doing before they went to jail. So we need to find ways that we can get them engaged, we can get them the help that they need to get out of the gangs. That's not going to work for everybody, but even if it works for 10%, that's 10% less people we're going to have to arrest potentially. We need to work at building an effective strategy and partnership. So everything that I've talked about here today, I really hope that it's a starting point for all of us to work together to try and deal with some of these issues. Like I said, we're not going to deal with this on our own. The RCMP is not going to deal with this on our own. The communities aren't going to deal with it on their own. We need to all work together. We also need to look at determining the extent of gang members and gang activity in the province. Like I said, we've only scratched the surface, so we need to do a better job of that, and we are putting things in place on the RCMP side of things so that we can move forward with doing that. Again, we also need to look at some of those other things, crime prevention and general deterrence. And I still give my parents crap for this. I'll go home, my parents still live in Ituna, but I'll go to their house and there's still keys in their ignition and their doors are unlocked. Not as much as it used to be growing up on the farm. I can tell you that every one of our vehicles had the keys in the ignition and the doors were unlocked unless we went on a holiday somewhere. That was the only time. And just to give you a bit of an example of this, when I was working in Saskatoon Detachment, I worked really Saskatoon East, so it really encompassed like Clavette, Hanley, Vaughan to Aberdeen, and so on. There's a bunch of different communities that we policed, but on one specific day, it was in the winter, we had a call to some break-and-enters in Clavette. And there was fresh snow, so we could see the person's footprints. And we'd got 1 or 2 calls about houses being broken into or suspicious people. But we were able to essentially just track the footprints, and they went to every house down the block looking for an unlocked door. We need to do as much as we can to prevent these guys and deter them. Again, it's not the only answer, but it's something that we need to be doing. We need to try and prevent as much of the stuff as we can, especially when it comes to firearms. Those firearms that aren't secured in residences are the firearms that we're finding in vehicles on people that we're arresting. In some situations, the serial numbers are scratched off, so we can't identify where they're coming from. But we know that this is the case through the investigations that we've done and just talking to people. So we really need to have community involvement and community support with some of the things that we can prevent. We can't prevent everything. If somebody wants to get in your house, they're probably going to do it. But there's a good chance that they may look for the first unlocked door and go into that house and miss your house because yours is locked. Statistics. Again, this is specifically on meth. So this is specifically meth and specifically Saskatchewan. And so this slide talks about possession. So somebody that just has a quantity of methamphetamine on them. you can see the trend is up since 2015, from 2015 to 2018. 2015 we had roughly 65 files. In 2017 we had about 370. So there's a steady increase. When we look at our municipal detachments, so those are places like Battleford, Yorkton, Swift Current. In 2015 there was maybe a dozen files. In 2018 we had over 75. So there's a steady increase in methamphetamine in the province. When we look at trafficking, so somebody that we actually catch in the act of trafficking, so giving from one to another, things like that. In 2015 we had about 25 files. In 2018 we had around 140. Again, those municipal detachments started out in 2015 where it was, maybe again 5, 10. 2018 it's increased to nearly 40. So we're seeing a constant increase, and these numbers I think just go to show the fact that methamphetamine is an increasing problem in our province, and it's something that needs to get addressed. When we look at possession for the purpose of trafficking, those are essentially times where we arrest somebody and they've got a quantity of drugs on them that we believe is solely for trafficking. In 2015, the municipal detachment saw a 700% increase, and RCMP as a whole in Saskatchewan saw a 276% increase. So those are pretty staggering numbers in my view. When we look at firearms-related files from 2013 to 2019, so this is any file where a firearm was involved. It could be a stolen firearm, it could be an unsecured firearm, things like that. In 2013, we had almost 800, and in 2019, we had about 1,450. So it continues to show that increase. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time here, probably fairly close. One more slide, and then you guys can ask your questions. But takeaways, it really comes down to one thing. I'm not going to read the slides, but what needs to happen is we need to work together. I can't stress that enough. We can't look at doing a multifaceted approach in stages or steps. We need to focus on doing this together. We need to take care of all these steps at the same time. We need to implement these things so that 10 years from now, hopefully we're going to see the result of what we've done today, and we're going to see lower crime rates, we're going to see less youth involved in crime, and we are going to have safer communities. This isn't a short-term strategy. This isn't for short-term success, because honestly, I don't believe that that's going to happen. We're going to do everything that we can to mitigate any risks that the communities face, but we need to be realistic, and we need to all work together so that we can develop these strategies and be effective. Hopefully this happens a lot sooner than later, but I don't know how that's going to happen yet. But we are going to be doing our best, and I can assure you that those communications have started with our community leaders, with other police jurisdiction, police agencies, and with the province. And so the people that can make changes are involved. I can tell you that the RCMP is moving forward in a lot of good directions, and I really think that we are going to have some really positive impacts moving forward, but it's going to take some time. Again, it's going to take some patience, but I can assure you that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that the communities that we're policing are as safe as we can make them. That's it.
Thank you, Tyler. And if we learned anything from Starsky and Hutch, Cagney and Lacey, Men in Black, is that crime prevention travels in partners. So joining Tyler today, we have got Inspector Tammy Patterson, who heads up the crime prevention, crime reduction unit for the RCMP. She's going to join him up on stage here if there's any other questions that he needs assistance with. Today, this will also be on the app and then on the YouTube channel when it's presented. There's some technical information, a lot of details here, so you'll be able to review that later if you want to. And we're going to open it up for questions and answers, but I wanted to point out that today you got a tremendous amount of information, so we're going to make sure it's available to you later. This was an opportunity for you to understand the foundations and the operations of this unit. Now it's an opportunity for you as community leaders who have your eyes in your communities regularly. You're the experts about when things change in your community because you see it. This is an opportunity for you to ask the questions about that, and then what the mechanisms are going to be moving forward for you to be able to share that information with this unit and the operation so that they're getting everything they need to make that happen. And the one point about focusing on the youth, I'm just going to add, my niece was 13 when she was brought into a gang in Saskatoon. Middle class, Caucasian, white family. There were no issues except she didn't feel like she belonged. They latched onto her and gave her a sense of family, and it was just ridiculous what they had her doing at that young age. And we've seen as young as, I believe, 10 to 12 in Saskatoon. There's a gang that focuses on youth right across Western Canada. They're the minors. That's what they're focusing and attracting. So the attention to youth is critical at this point. I know you, Mr. Maloney. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Bob Maloney, Mayor of Yorkton. The statistics are staggering, and we were just sitting here gasping, looking at these numbers in our communities. I'm not going to take up any time. Youth centers, it's something we don't tend to get involved in social sector types of things, but when I'm looking at these numbers, I'm just wondering, in your experience, if youth centers and activities and things that we can program as cities have an effect, have an impact, and are a way to go.
Yeah, well, I think, as Tyler indicated, just in Ituna, just the example of having a place for kids to go and somewhere to keep them out of trouble, so to speak. And I think for all of us probably growing up, if you're involved in activities, you're less likely to go and find some places to drink and do bad stuff and just kind of get up to some mischief. So yes, I would think so. I think that's lacking in our communities. I think when we talk about engaging youth, I think community centers are important, but I also think it's important in forming partnerships with us. So as you say, we're not really, our job is really enforcement, but we're very interested in getting involved with partnerships with communities and community organizations to do programming, to support programming, to do some awareness and some prevention activities with youth. But for sure, I think, like Tyler said, if we're going to make a difference, that's where we're going to make that difference is targeting our youth and targeting kids, like young kids.
And we'll make sure that the link to the Straight Up program in Saskatoon is on there. We funded it by the municipal government and rolled it into our police service, and that's exactly what it does. Is it targets the youth that are at risk and provides services for them and keeps an eye on them. Go ahead, sir, if you can identify yourself.
Michael B. Hill from the city of Humboldt. Our social services and our youth groups that we have put together have had tremendous success in a lot of this. I appreciate what you're saying. The staggering numbers, in the last 5 years, our social outreach program that deals with the addictions and stuff has seen a 650% increase in clients with only a 200% increase in funding and available resources, which is not on you, it's on the province to step up and do something about that. But I also appreciate you are dealing somewhere with between 700 and 900 officers short just in the province of Saskatchewan, and the move to go to a super hub policing initiative. I guess I'm curious, with 14 officers in the crime drug reduction teams, how you intend to do the entire province with this massive escalating issue.
Well, I can answer part of that. When it comes down to the hub and things like that, I have no knowledge or control over any of that. But what I can say is that the importance behind the crime reduction teams and our usefulness to our communities is the fact that in some situations, a community might face an influx of crime. So it might be something short term, where if you just simply put 2 more police officers in that community, that's not necessarily going to solve any of the problems. Whereas when you have 14, potentially 14 and upwards, when we look at the integrated crime reduction teams, if they have the opportunity to travel outside the communities as well that are their primary jurisdictions, such as Saskatoon, Regina, and Prince Albert, that is going to provide further safety to those communities, and it's going to provide the resources in a timely fashion. Obviously, we can't go everywhere and we can't be everywhere all the time, but we need to focus on the communities that need. I can tell you that in my experience over the last few years, I've seen a steady increase in membership, and I've seen the situation get a lot better. So I think the crime reduction teams are really going to just supplement what detachments are doing, and we're going to be able to hit those communities when they're in need the most. And hopefully that's going to also assist your communities in not having those increased contributions or whatever to increase membership in your community. So.
I can't, again, I'm in the same position as Tyler. I'm certainly not in a position to speak about any of the hubbing of the detachments. We have Chief Superintendent Alfredo Bangloy that's going to be here tomorrow with the ministers, and he'll be in a much better position to speak to that.
Oh, believe me, I'll ask him.
Yeah, he'll be the right person to ask. But I will say, the CRT, and we have integrated the crime reduction teams now in Saskatoon, Prince Albert, and Regina. It's the communication, it's the collaboration between the police services, and honestly, we have to improve. Like, we don't really talk to each other all that well, except for some of the integrated units. So as I'm sitting there listening to Tyler, the wheels are spinning, saying, okay, I got to set up a meeting and talk to those guys, because, we're just starting out, but we have to talk about what's going on. And also, you have the opportunity in your communities with town halls. Attend those town hall meetings with the detachments and tell them what you think, and come there with solutions and come there with answers. And I think everybody understands. And I always say, I told Tyler, you know what, you're from Ituna, say that. I'm from Quebec. I don't like to brag, because usually that's not positive. But I always say, but I'm an English Quebecer. So, but I've been in the province for 28 years now. I married a guy from Punachai. And after I said, please don't let me marry anyone from here, I want to leave. But I ended up now, this is home. And I love it. But we have to work together. And that is the key message. We have to form partnerships. We have to work together.
Absolutely.
Quebec has gangs too. The only big difference is they speak in both languages. Sir, we're going to take the second question from the gentleman behind you. Yes, and I'm just going to reiterate, this is about the crime reduction, crime prevention unit and their efforts and their operations. Any questions about hub and number of officers will come up tomorrow at the dialogue with the ministers. Please don't bring them up today. We brought the experts for you from this particular area to talk about this. That dialogue session tomorrow is at 9 a.m., room number 5. Go ahead.
I'm not going to talk about the hub, but so Trent Mitchell, City of Melfort. First off, I want to say thank you to the RCMP for the work that you do in our communities. It's a very difficult job. I can't fathom what you see day in and day out. I think you do a tremendous job with the resources that you have, and I just want to commend you for that, first off. One of the things I hear from our constituents around meth particularly, and you referred to the concept of a one-hit hook, people getting hooked after one hit. We're a small city, 6,500 people. You could ask pretty much anyone in town who's selling meth. They can tell you who's selling meth, whether they're a senior or whether they're a kid. What I hear from the constituents is the frustration is, why are they still allowed to sell meth? Why, when we know who they are we not doing anything about it? And I know the complexities of the justice system. I'm just putting that out there from that frustration perspective. And with the one hit, how can we curb that? How can we act quicker?
Well, that's a really good question, a really tough one to give you a really good answer on. I can tell you from my experience that when we go into communities, a lot of people will tell us, yeah, that guy's pointing, or that guy's selling drugs, that guy's got this in his house, and so on. But what we really need is somebody to either provide statements or contact Crime Stoppers. We need to have more than just somebody saying that there's drugs in that house. So it really comes down to witnesses and people that are willing to help us out. I can assure you that any opportunity that we get to either do a search warrant or anything like that, we will do it. And I think that really comes into the whole part where we need to focus more on talking to our communities. And the town halls are a really good way of conveying the message of what we need to do to be better and what we need from the community so that we can be successful and we can help make the community safer. And really long story short, we need people that are willing to give us statements or act as confidential informants or provide information to Crime Stoppers. Those are really the three ways that we can tackle this problem. And unfortunately, a lot of it does come back on the community and community involvement to have the proper results at the end of the day.
Who in the room has also worked with SCAN, Safer Communities and Neighborhoods within their community? Yeah, us as well too, and they have assisted us with some of those issues as well. Come ahead.
Hi, I'm Leah Zoner, traveling all the way from Kendall, Saskatchewan. I had a question relating back to the statistics you had placed up there. This was regarding the meth statistics, and I can't remember exactly which slides I was looking at, but I noticed in the 2017-2018, the municipal stats plateaued in that area or even went down. So I'm just wondering what factors or what was going on that time period that made it reflect that way.
Yeah, so one of the issues that we face is as crime evolves, 10 years ago we were probably looking at different issues, whether they be crack cocaine or cocaine. Our system that we pull these numbers from in a lot of situations is really designed as a police reporting system. So it's where we input all of our information. When we look at some of these statistics, they're based on that information, but it's not as concise, and it's not really, the main purpose isn't for data collection or stats collection. So it could be a result of the way the checks were done, potentially, the way things were scored. It's likely a lot of input issues. Moving forward, I'm not really certain how we're going to be able to provide 100% accurate stats. I don't think that that's ever going to be possible. But as we're moving forward and as crime evolves and as we evolve, we're looking for different mechanisms to try and track this stuff accurately. I can tell you on the CRT, I actually track everything on Excel spreadsheet. That's just the easiest way. We've had situations where the provinces ask for stats, or we look to provide information to the communities that we're serving, and we can give them the amount of arrests that we've had, the amount of contacts we've had with our community, the amount of traffic stops, the amount of charges we've dealt with, and so on. So I think at a smaller level, we can give you really good numbers, but as things change, as crime changes, we're not necessarily ever going to be able to have those concrete stats to show what's really happening in the communities.
So all that to say, they might not be accurate.
So as the next gentleman makes his way up to the mic, they have a question on the app that says, what is the least amount of members for it to be considered a gang?
3 or more.
3 or more. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I am from Gladwin, so I met you, and you guys had that hall meeting, and before that, as counselors, we were getting hecked for not doing stuff, and you know what it was like up there. But when you guys came in and presented your program, the community really felt better, and thank you for the job you did.
Appreciate that.
Thank you
very much.
I'm just going to take 2 seconds to give some kudos to these guys. So I sit in a desk in Regina. Like, I am not out there. I'm thankful that I sit in a desk in Regina, because I'm going to tell you, when Tyler says that the violence, the level of violence, it is unfathomable. Like the guns and the just sheer disregard for just general safety. And not just the RCMP, like in all of the municipality, or our city police agencies as well. So they do a good job, and they work their butts off, and they place themselves at risk. And I say every shift. Like, when I go home, I worry about these guys like they're my kids, because I just know they're out there. Like Tyler said, like when I joined the force 28 years ago, I wasn't worried about anybody carrying a gun. We didn't see that. So
Thank you for
Thank
sir.
comment. Yes, thank you. It's very much appreciated.
Jonathan Torson, City of Lloydminster, City Councillor. I first had a comment on something, just something about what we're doing, although we are K Division, not F Division, but one of the things that our municipality has done is paid for 2 school resource officers that are in both school divisions, and they meet the kids from a very young age, kindergarten all the way up. The kids trust the police officers after that. And then they also kind of work as caseworkers for kids who are having a difficult time, get to them before they get to the point where they might make serious bad decisions in their life. So that's just kind of something we've been working on. But my question is, being that a lot of these things are a social issue, and there's lots of different organizations doing different things within our communities, whether that be, violence against women, things like that, or whether they be addictions type of resources within communities. But what do you see as the municipality's role in terms of helping to coordinate the efforts for some of these people who are being tracked, who maybe have social issues, and getting them to the groups that are helping those kind of people out?
Well, first of all, I had it on my slide yesterday, and I said I was going to remember it, so I deleted it. But when we look at trying to help some of these individuals, we have to look at a few different aspects. We have to look at financial support. So if somebody's looking to leave a gang, we have to figure out how we can support them. Because if they have no money, they're probably going to fall back into the same routine that they just came out of. We have to look at other issues such as housing. So depending on the situation of the community that they're living in, they may need to be relocated. They need a safe place to go. So we have to look at those aspects. It's difficult. I don't have those answers, and unfortunately a lot of these social issues are the root causes of some of this.
One of the things that, say for La Ronge, I don't know if there's anyone here from La Ronge, they have a very good, have you heard of, and I want to say hub, but hub in a different sense. So the hub model where all the agencies get together to deal with kind of issues. So what they do in Lloydminster is actually our community program officer, she works at the detachment, and they will identify youth at risk. And before they really get in necessarily any trouble, but it could be, you know, there's a call to my house and there's violence and the child is there. So they've seen it, they're not really involved in any trouble, and they're identified as being at risk because of what's going on in the family, what's going on, maybe they're not attending school, and they're brought to the hub table where all the agencies are around. So if you have a hub table, I think that's one of the ways that you can get involved. I know certainly working together, housing is really important, I think, for gang members, but also at the youth level. I think forming, you know, one of the resources that we've been using is the Red Cross. They'll come in, Red Cross will come into a smaller community. They've been going up to the north, and I should say we've been partnering with them. And they'll talk to the community about what their needs are, and they'll provide some support. So for instance, they were up in Sandy Bay, and they were doing swimming lessons. They were doing first aid training. They were doing babysitting lessons. So focused on youth. So I think those are some of the things. It's kind of thinking about working together. Hub model works. What are your resources and how can you provide support? And you know, I'd say we're willing to partner. Like we'll partner with you. And I know there's a lot of work. Like Tyler, them do a lot of work in that Lloydminster kind of across the border area as well, and enforcement wise. But I think it's partnering with, you know, the agencies that you have. And we don't have more money. We're not getting more money. So how do you do it a little bit differently? And I think it's working with partnerships and working with people that care just like you do.
There's a number of community-based organizations and NGOs throughout the province that can assist you in your communities. We have a variance of community sizes within this room and the different resources that you have right in your community. But reach out to us, we can help you. Suma can help coordinate that.
Yep.
There's also the national focus on, it used to be the opioid focus, but they've attached the meth to it as well too, that Minister Blair is looking after the task force, and they're calling it the synthetic drugs now, which is you're on the corridor right through Lloydminster that comes all the way through and is bringing all the crap in. It's accessible, it's cheap, it's addictive, and it's the cancer in most of our communities that are causing a lot of the problems. The youth, your community resources officer is good for you. We took ours out a number of years ago and had to put them back in because it was a mistake to take them out of the schools.
You'll find there's a number of RCMP detachments that have community, like they have school resource officers. We also have the community constables and the community program officers. I'm going to say those resource officers that we have, those folks that are doing that community engagement and that engagement with youth, invaluable. So if there's a way of providing some dollars for that, we need cops on the street, but we also need employees, at least they maybe not always uniformed presence, but in the schools as well. I agree.
And Inspector Patterson had told me that the town halls are very beneficial to hear the information from you, but you're not just limited to that communication with them. They want to hear from you at any time. So reach out if you have issues within your community and make sure that you contact this division to talk to them and let them know what's going on. That channel exists for you, and we want to make sure that you're using it. And if there's anything that you want to see in upcoming conventions or webinars even from SUMA, let me know. We can also get that presented for you as well too, because this is just scratching the surface of this issue, and we need to get as much information in your hands as possible. Anything on the app? Thank you. Staff says we're all clear. So there's 3 minutes left. I'm going to pose you with one question to answer unless somebody comes up to the mic. Your one slide said that you need to do a better job of sharing information, develop educational material, and focus on youth. Do you have a strategy or I'll call it a business plan for lack of better things on what you're going to do for those three to roll it out and what might involve engagement with this group here?
Well, in fact, we do. Thank you for asking that question. We actually have a youth strategy that we're just I sent it out for a last look, and specifically what we've done is we reached out actually to the youth across the province in the schools, and we said, what's important to you? Because we hold town halls, but how many kids actually show up at the town halls? So we thought, you know what, we're gonna actually talk to the kids. So. And I should have brought it, I didn't bring it, but the number one issues were drugs, violence, vaping was a big issue, driving, reckless driving, and I want to say there was another one. So they identified it, but one of the main things we took away from that is the contact they wanted with police. And they said, just say hello, just engage with us. Don't always be the heavy hand. I'm going to tell you, Tyler is one of the, he's a digger and wants to catch bad guys and put them in jail. But he hands out mittens. And he hands out stickers. And you're not gonna, like, I have to like restrain him sometimes so he doesn't get in trouble because he's so hard-nosed about getting those gang members in jail, but he hands out mittens. And that's the kind of things we have to do as well. But we do have a youth strategy. We're focusing on engagement with youth, creating leadership opportunities, creating opportunities for us to interact, and we've developed some gang materials we're developing. We also have an End Gang Life program. If you're interested, come and see me. We can come into schools in your area, and we can provide that. We can provide those sessions. We work with the other police agencies. We're going to increase that communication, but we do have a strategy in place. And if you are interested in saying, hey, how can we get the youth in our community involved with you? Come and see me.
Kate Kading, Town of Rostern. I'll be straight up with everybody. I am an RCMP wife. So I just wanted to know what your unit, what connection your unit has with the National Youth Advisory Committee.
Okay.
With people who don't know, there is a group, I think it's about 100 young people across the country. Our son, our 15-year-old son is one of them. You apply, you get accepted, and they have a Facebook forum, and they have all these milestones that they go through. And is this unit involved with anything that comes out of that committee?
So we have a tight, my role is I'm the connection to Ottawa. We work very closely with the Ottawa unit for youth services, the vulnerable persons unit. And in fact, one of the things in our youth strategy, and maybe your son would like to be somebody that would be involved, is coming up a way to connect with youth within the province of Saskatchewan. And we thought student councils, but then we're thinking, you know what, student councils, those are already the people those are already the kids that are the go-getters and the hard workers. How do we engage with youth that might not be on the student council? Maybe the guy that's not the hockey player, maybe the guy or the gal who's maybe struggling a little bit and could use, and maybe has some really great input for us. So we are connected with them. We're also looking at ways to do something like that within the province.
I see nobody else at the mic. I want to thank our presenters for being here today. I'm going to give you a couple last closing words here, but I just want to point out that my niece is out of the gang. She's now got her GET. She's got her business certificate. 3-year-old daughter in her own home and a car. She got her driver's license. But we didn't wait for provincial support or programs because they didn't exist. The family had to intervene and do exactly what's talking here about being engaged and active and getting into her life and helping her. It wouldn't have happened if we didn't do that because the provincial supports are not there. And that's not anybody's fault, it's just they don't exist to address the issues that those youth are facing. So if each of you had one thing that municipal government could do to help your job better, what would it be?
I would say come to the table with solutions. Come to the table saying, we want to work with you. And if you don't get the answer from your local detachment commander, go to the next person. Call me.
We want to work with you. Tyler, yours?
You know what, I think if you could just ask us those questions that you have, let us do our best to answer them or find some of the solutions or help you find some solutions. A lot of times it's not knowing what the other side is doing, and it's really just a lack of communication. So if we can do a better job on both ends, I think we're going to see a lot more progress.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking our presenters.